Today we are going to start three-dimensional shapes. In a previous lesson we talked about the difference between flat shapes and solid shapes, or 2D shapes and 3D shapes. Now we're going to get to dive into the names of those solid shapes. The first shape, we're going to do in this lesson is called a prism. You try. Here is an example of a prism. Let's talk about what makes something a prism. Before we do, this is a poem that we are going to read every time we do a new shape. It's a really fun poem, so I'll do it first, and then soon you'll be able to say the parts after me. It goes like this. 3D shapes are fat, not flat. A cone is like a party hat. A sphere is a bouncy ball. A prism is a building tall. A cylinder is like a soda pop. A cube is like a dice you drop. 3D shapes are here and there. 3D shapes are everywhere. Now let's see where they are. So let's talk about our word. This is our vocabulary word, prism. A prism, it is a solid shape, and it has something called faces. So in a flat shape, we called it sides. It's very funny. It's like our face. The sides of a solid shape are called faces. So this is a face, this is a face, this is a face, and there are even more faces that are kind of hard to see when we just look at the picture, but it's easier when we have an actual prism in front of us. And this is a rectangular prism because all of the faces are rectangles. Remember that all rectangles have 4 sides and 4 corners. So if we look just at one face of the prism, we can see this arrow, this part is just pointing to a rectangle. We also have a face here. It's also a rectangle, also a rectangle. Then we have corners. So the corners are where the faces meet other faces. So right now we have a corner right here, right here. We have lots of corners on this shape. So I have some prisms. I went through the things in my house to try to find different shapes, and here's what I found. I found this box. And I think it holds like outlets or something. I'm not even sure. But here is a prism, and I want to show you how I know it's a prism. Because each face has 4 sides and 4 corners. Here's a face. That's a face. It has 1, 2, 3, 4 sides, and so it has 4 corners. Here's a face. It has 1, 2, 3, 4 sides and 4 corners. Remember this shape? This is actually another shape too. It's a square. All that matters is that all the faces have 4 sides and 4 corners. So they can be squares where all the sides are equal, or they can be rectangles where all 2 sides are long and 2 sides are short. All of the faces of this shape, see what happens when I turn it around, you can see all of them. They're all 4 sides and 4 corners. So let's count how many faces we see. It's kind of tricky, so we'll do it together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I see 6 faces. Let's count again. Sometimes when I'm counting, I make mistakes, and this can be tricky to see what we've counted already and what we haven't. So let's do it again just to be sure. I'll count the top and the bottom, and then I'll go around and count the sides. Remember, we're counting the faces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 faces. Now let's count the corners. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the attributes of this shape are that they have rectangle faces, 6 rectangle faces, and 8 corners. Let's look at another example. This one is still a prism, but the shape of it is really different. This is a book. I wonder if you know who this is. This is Michelle Obama, and I read this book, and now I can look at it as a prism. It's not flat because look, there's a little bit of space between my hands. If something was flat, like there are a lot of pages of paper in this book, here's just one piece of paper, that's flat. That would be a square or a rectangle maybe. This is a prism because it's solid. So let's count the faces. It should be the same because the attributes of a shape are the same. So let's count the faces first. I know this face is a rectangle because it has 4 sides and 4 corners. Let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there's one in the back over here, 6. Same thing. This prism, all prisms have 6 rectangle faces, and now let's count the corners. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So those are the corners and faces of my shape. Now let's take a look at some other examples of prisms. Here's more corners, more corners. Okay, so do you remember how many faces we said it has? It has 6 faces, and remember they're all rectangles. They have 4 sides and 4 corners. And the corners on the prism that we counted 8. So here's some examples. And you can tell me if these are prisms or not. Remember the attributes we said, it's a solid shape with 6 rectangle faces and 8 corners. Is a box of cereal a rectangular prism a prism? Think about what it looks like in the picture. Think about actually holding a box of cereal. Yeah, that's a prism. Is a box of tissues a prism? It is. I see this rectangle face right here. I can count all of the faces. It's easier when you have something that you can turn around, but you can imagine what a box of tissues looks like. That's a prism. Is this building a prism? It is. Remember the poem said a prism is like a really tall building? Definitely a prism. Is this a rectangular prism? It isn't. Let me show you why. I see a rectangle face right here on the long side, but on this side, instead of a rectangle, what do you see? I see a triangle. Look, it has 1, 2, 3 sides on this face. So nope, not a rectangular prism, not what we're looking for. Is this dollar bill a prism? No, it's flat. Remember, we can take a dollar bill and put it in our hands. That's just a rectangle. It needs to be solid to be a prism. Is this a prism? It is. It's also another shape that we'll talk about soon called a cube. But remember, for something to be a rectangle, it just has to have each face has 4 corners and 4 sides. If I look at this face that's yellow, I see 1, 2, 3, 4 sides and 4 corners. It's a square face, but that counts. So we identified prisms by their attributes today. We're going to be looking at lots of different shapes. I wonder if you notice other prisms in your house or at school, like the objects that I found. I can't wait to see what you discover when you're finding prisms with 6 rectangle faces and 8 corners. Bye!